Hello, all you wonderful people, and welcome back to another episode of ESO Healer Build Breakdown, the series where we take an in-depth look at some of the many healing builds found in the Elder Scrolls Online. My name's Doc, your host for all things healing, and in this episode, we'll be covering the subclassing update to the classic Spell Power Cure and Pillager's Prophet build, otherwise known as the Ulti-Gen build. Let's get into this. So, despite the Pearls of Ehlnofey and Pillager's Prophet receiving a pretty substantial nerf in Update 46, this build remains a fantastic source of ultimate generation for the team. Your goal is to generate as much ultimate as possible through the use of potions, your class lines, and the Pearls of Ehlnofey mythic. Then, you'll distribute some of that ultimate to your team using the Pillager's Prophet set. Outside of providing your team with a unique form of ultimate generation, this build will often act as the off healer or kite healer when an encounter calls for one. So, as we always do, let's start by talking about our race and skill lines. Like with all of my healing builds, you guys will almost always catch me running the Breton. They bring fantastic sustain, and while we do want to keep our sustain a little on the lower side for pearls, being a Breton is usually not going to cause you to over-sustain by itself. Of course, though, if you really want to min-max your ultimate generation, then the Nord will be the best choice for this build. Then, we also have the Argonian if you feel like you need the extra healing. For our class lines, we'll be starting off by running Siphoning from the Nightblade for the passives that will generate a ton of ultimate for us. Next, we'll be using Bone Tyrant from the Necromancer for the Necrotic Potency morph of the Bitter Harvest skill. Finally, for our flex spot, here are our options. All of these skill lines in here have passives or ultimates that will be good for this build, and while I'm personally running Dawn's Wrath from the Templar, I think the Living Death skill line from the Necromancer will be your best choice in terms of raw ultimate generation. So that's right, Necromains, rejoice, because if you're a Necromancer base class, this is the perfect trial build for you. Up next, let's talk about our attributes and Mundus Stone. For our attributes, we'll put all 64 into Magicka as we usually do, and for our Mundus, I'm running the Ritual for the extra healing. I personally found that the Atronach was making me over-sustain just by a little bit. However, if you'd prefer to run the Atronach, it is a viable option. For our food, I'd recommend either the Clockwork Citrus Fillet, which can be found from a quest line in the Clockwork City Outlaws Refuge, or the Witch Mother's Potent Brew, which you can buy from guild traders. They both increase your health, Magicka, and Magicka recovery. I'm running the Witch Mother's Potent Brew in the gameplay, and I think that with everything else that I'm running in this build, it gives me just enough sustain without being too much. For potions, your best bet is going to be running the Heroism Potion for the Minor Heroism buff that will help us generate some more ultimate. Of course, though, if you can't craft or afford Heroism Potions for whatever reason, you can always use some Tri-Restoration, Spell Power, or even just some simple Magicka potions. Next up, it's on to champion points, and starting with our blue CP tree, we have From the Brink, which will grant a massive damage shield to allies who are healing if they fall below 25% health, Swift Renewal, which will increase the amount of healing that our heal over time skills do, Soothing Tide, this will increase the amount of healing that our area of effect heals do, and finally, Enlivening Overflow or Hope Infusion. Enlivening Overflow will grant group members, including yourself, extra recovery when you overheal them, and Hope Infusion will grant Minor Heroism, which generates ultimate to group members, including yourself, when healing them below 50%. I usually run Hope Infusion by default on this build, but I do know some groups are running Heroism banners, so if you know that every single person in your group has Minor Heroism covered, then it's okay to just have both healers on Overflow, but if you know that someone needs Heroism, I would bring this anyway. For our red CP tree, we have Boundless Vitality, and this will give you a little extra health, which will make you a little bit harder to put down. Next up is Fortified, which will increase our survivability even further by giving us some extra armor. Next up is Rejuvenation, which will grant us some extra health, Magicka, and stamina recovery. The actual Magicka recovery we get is small enough that I don't think it negatively impacted Pearls. I think that you can still use this just fine, but if you find that you are over-sustaining, this can be a great little small tweak you can make just to see kind of where you need to be. And lastly, we have Slippery or Celerity. Slippery will automatically break you out of any disabling effect you get hit with on a cooldown, and Celerity will increase your movement speed. I'm running Slippery since I always run Slippery in Trials, but if you don't feel like you need it, Celerity is a great option too. Okay, now we're on to skills. As always, just a friendly reminder that this particular setup assumes you're on my combination of Siphoning, Bone Tyrant, and Dawn's Wrath. If you chose one or multiple of the flex options, then you would just need to swap out a couple class skills. First up, on our Restoration Staff front bar, we have Healthy Offering. One of the strongest single target heals in the game, this siphoning skill is a great tool for burst healing some Frost Tombs or a tank with Baneful Mark or something like that. It also provides us with Minor Mending, which will make subsequent casts even stronger. Next up is Combat Prayer, and you knew this one was coming. Our main spammable, this Restoration Staff skill provides us with a burst of healing, a defensive buff via Minor Resolve, and a damage buff via Minor Berserk. Next up is Illustrious Healing, a wonderful AoE heal from the Restoration Staff line that offers great healing output, simple and straightforward. Next is either Overflowing Altar or Energy Orb. Both from the Undaunted skill line, Overflowing Altar provides minor lifesteal and a synergy that restores health. Energy Orb is a slow-moving AoE heal that also provides a resource restore synergy. I'm running Orb on this build because I tend to find that the group healer will usually run Altar, but it doesn't really matter as long as both of these skills are present amongst the healers. Whoever can run whichever, doesn't really matter. Next up is Radiating Regeneration, an excellent Restoration Staff heal over time that will be a great way to constantly refresh the Major Courage buff from Spell Power Cure. And for our first ultimate, we have Reviving Barrier. We won't typically cast this support line ultimate, but what it does do is offer us some solid magicka recovery via the Magicka Aid passive. Next up, on our Destruction Staff back bar, we have Siphoning Attacks. This siphoning skill will give us a lot more control over our resources, assisting us in staying below 50% magicka, but not dropping too low. It's also a great way to proc the transfer passive, which will give us a couple extra ultimates. Next is Elemental Blockade, and the main reason you'll usually see this Destruction Staff skill on our back bar is so that we can proc our back bar enchantment. There's also the chance it applies an elemental debuff to the enemy as well. Up next, we got Purifying Light. This Dawn's Wrath skill is a nice little burst of damage with a, okay heal after it ends. The nicest thing about it, though, is that it activates the Prism passive, which will generate ultimate for us. Up next, we have Necrotic Potency. This Bone Tyrant skill will allow us to generate tons and tons of ultimate in a very short time, so long as there are corpses around. And in my experience, in most encounters, there will usually be enough corpses for you to justify bringing this skill. And next we have Echoing Vigor. From the Assault skill line, this is another great heal over time that you'll want to keep active as much as possible because it provides a ton of healing. And finally, for our back bar ultimate, we have Aggressive Warhorn. Also from the Assault skill line, this ultimate will grant our allies extra magicka and stamina, as well as Major Force, which increases critical damage. Like I talked about in my dungeon build, you can also, and I've seen more people recommend this as well, use the Storm Atronach from the Daedric summoning skill line in place of this skill, but Horn is still a good skill if you don't want to sacrifice your flex spot for Storm Atro. Finally, it's on to our sets, traits, and enchantments. Now, like with the previous Ulti-Gen build, we have to get a little creative with these placements due to our mythic items, so just listen carefully when I describe where each piece goes, and feel free to pause or rewind or whatever if you need to. Let's start with what we're calling our front bar, or in this case, our chest, hands, waist, and restoration staff. In that spot, we'll want Spell Power Cure. Found in the White Gold Tower dungeon, this set will grant anyone you overheal Major Courage, which will increase their weapon and spell damage. The weight is light because SPC is only available in light. The traits you'll want are Divines to increase the buff we get from our Mundus stone, but as I always mention, you can also use Infused on pieces with higher enchantment scaling to make those enchantments even stronger. Speaking of which, for enchantments, we will want all max magicka. For our restoration staff, we'll want either the decisive trait for even more ultimate, or the powered trait for extra healing. And the enchantment will either be Absorb Magicka for more sustain, or Berserker for more healing and damage. In our back bar spot, or in this case, our legs, feet, rings, and destruction staff, we'll be using Pillager's Prophet. Found in the Dreadsail Reef trial, whenever you cast your ultimate, you grant ultimate charge to your group members depending on how much ultimate you spend when casting. The body pieces will all have the same traits and enchantments as the rest of your body pieces. For your destruction staff, the element isn't super important, so feel free to use what you like. We'll be using the Infuse trait to keep a higher uptime on our enchantment, and either the Crushing enchantment to reduce enemy armor, or the Berserker enchantment for, again, more healing and damage. For our jewelry, the optimal setup is to pair the Infuse trait with the Potion cooldown enchantment to take advantage of the Catalyst passive from the Siphoning skill line, which will grant you a ton of ultimate whenever you use a potion. If you choose not to use that setup for one reason or another, and that's totally okay if you don't, then you'll want the Arcane trait for some more magicka, and those enchantments will either be magicka recovery or spell damage, or a combination of the two. Just remember not to let your recovery get too high. Next up is our monster set, meaning the 2-piece head and shoulder set. In this spot, we'll be running Symphony of Blades. Found in Vet Depths of Malatar, this set will restore magicka and stamina to someone whenever they're running low on their highest maximum resource. Our traits and enchantments will be the same as the rest of our body pieces. For weight, you can go with 1 light and 1 medium for a balance of sustain and healing, 2 medium for extra healing, or you can always run 1 medium and 1 heavy for the extra defenses and resources you get from the Undaunted passive. Finally, we've got our arena weapon and mythic item section. In this case, we'll be using the Pearls of Ehlnofey mythic necklace. Found from the Antiquity system, this necklace will grant you major heroism, which generates ultimate anytime you cast a healing spell while below 50% of your highest maximum resource. In our case, this would be magicka. This item right here is why you don't want your recovery to be too terribly high. You do want to try to find a nice little sweet spot, though, between having enough but also not too much magicka recovery. The traits and enchantments will be the same as the rest of our jewelry. And that was all we had for this episode of Healer Build Breakdown. As always, I hope you enjoyed the video and found it useful. I've still got even more build videos in the works, so make sure to subscribe and check out the link tree in the description so you don't miss any of those. I'd also like to take a moment to thank my Patreon supporters Dylan Stewart and Sharni Lee, as well as my YouTube members King Gingy, Durgy, Insert Username, and Eric from Ohio. Thank you guys for continuing to support me, and y'all are pretty awesome. I think all I've got left to say is that I've been Doc. Take care of yourselves, be good to others, don't forget to keep your magicka below 50%, and I will catch y'all in the next one.